Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into North Korea, a country that is just full of paradoxes. I mean, how can a nation that struggles to feed its own people also manage to build intercontinental missiles? It's a state of deep, deep contradictions, and we're going to try and unravel them. And that's really the central question, isn't it? How does this incredibly isolated, economically fragile country somehow become a global security threat that keeps the whole world on edge? The answer isn't simple. We have to look past the headlines and get into the very system itself. So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the state's founding ideologies, its twin pillars. Then, we'll see the power structure that brings those ideas to life. After that, we'll zoom in on what daily life is actually like for the people inside that system. And finally, we'll talk about their ultimate strategy on the world stage, the nuclear trump card. All right, let's start at the beginning. Everything, and I mean everything, in North Korea flows from its ideological blueprint. There are two core ideas you absolutely have to understand, because they pretty much dictate everything else. The first, and most important, is Juche. Kim Il-sung came up with this after the Korean War, and it's basically a philosophy of extreme self-reliance. You can think of it as the country's defiant statement to the rest of the world. We're going to do this our way, by ourselves. It's not just a policy, it's woven into the national DNA. Now, this big idea of self-reliance is propped up by three key pillars that all connect. First, you need political independence, or chaju. To keep that, you need to be economically self-sufficient, charip. And, of course, to protect both of those, you have to have a strong national self-defense, or chawi. These three together are the absolute bedrock of the state. And that third pillar, self-defense? Well, that leads us straight to the second big idea, Sangun. This is the military-first policy. It basically says that in a dangerous world, the military isn't just one part of the state, it is the state. It's the engine, the protector, the top priority. And that means it gets first dibs on every single resource the country has. Okay, so you've got these huge, all-consuming ideas. But ideas are just that, ideas. They need a structure to enforce them. So who or what is actually holding the reins of power in North Korea? Right at the very heart of the system is the Workers' Party of Korea. And you have to understand, there's no real difference between the party and the state. They're one and the same. Its authority is absolute. It reaches into every office, every classroom, every single household to make sure that the party line is followed without a single deviation. And at the very, very top of this party sits one family. Power has passed down directly from the founder, Kim Il-sung, called the Great Leader, to his son, Kim Jong-il, the Dear Leader, and now to his grandson, Kim Jong-un. And notice those titles. They aren't just president or chairman. They're portrayed as almost godlike figures, the fathers of the nation, in this incredibly powerful cult of personality. And if you want to know just how deep this cult of personality runs, get this. Back in 1997, North Korea literally reset its own calendar. For them, history doesn't start at year one. It starts in 1912, the year Kim Il-sung was born. That one fact tells you everything you need to know about how the regime bends all of reality, even time itself, to center on the ruling family. So we have the ideology and the power structure. But what does it actually feel like to be one of the 26 million people living inside the system? You know, how does all this grand strategy translate to an individual's life? Well, your entire life in North Korea is pretty much mapped out for you by a system called songbun. It's a hereditary caste system. But it's not based on money or nobility. It's based on how politically loyal your grandparents were during the Korean War. You are literally born into a class. And for most people, there's just no way to change it. As you can see here, everyone is sorted into one of three main buckets. At the top, you have the core class. These are the loyal elites. In the middle, the wavering class. And down at the bottom, the hostile class, people whose families were seen as unreliable. Your entire future depends on which of these boxes you're born into. Your path in life is basically set from birth. If you're born into the core class, you're on track for a good life in the capital, Pyongyang, with access to the best universities and jobs. But if you're born hostile, you can pretty much expect a life of hard manual labor, constant discrimination, and a daily struggle for basic things like food and medicine. And this struggle is made so much worse by the state's own choices. Remember that military-first policy? This chart shows what that really means. A massive slice of the national budget gets funneled into the military and weapons, while things like farming and healthcare are left fighting for the scraps. The result is constant shortages for nearly everyone else. So when the official system fails to provide, what happens? Well, people find a way, and that's where the Zhangmadang come in. These are black markets, technically illegal, but they've become an absolutely essential lifeline. People depend on them to survive. And the real irony? These markets don't just trade food and goods. They trade information. News, movies, music from the outside world get smuggled in, slowly chipping away at the state's total control. But let's be clear, the state's grip is still incredibly tight. I mean, just try to imagine a life with constant surveillance where you're forced into public self-criticism sessions to confess your ideological failings, where there's no free speech, no real internet. Even traveling to the next town requires official permission. Every aspect of life is used as a tool of control. And all of this brings us to the final, critical piece of the puzzle: the military. How does this tightly controlled, isolated fortress manage to project so much power and seem like such a threat to the rest of the world? First off, it's about sheer numbers. The Korean People's Army, or KPA, is one of the biggest standing armies on the planet. We're talking more than 1 million active soldiers with millions more in reserve. A huge chunk of the entire population is tied to the military machine. But here is the classic paradox of their military. They have the quantity, no doubt, a sea of soldiers, tanks, artillery pieces. But the quality? Most of that equipment is ancient, a lot of it Soviet-era tech from decades ago. In a straight-up conventional fight, they'd be seriously outmatched. And they know it. Which brings them to their ace in the hole. That's why North Korea has bet everything on its ultimate insurance policy: nuclear weapons. Ever since their first nuke test back in 2006, they've made, frankly, terrifying progress, building bigger bombs and intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, that can threaten countries thousands of miles away. And what makes this so incredibly dangerous is their official policy. It's not about waiting to get hit and then retaliating. It's about preemption. The regime has said, point blank, that if they think an attack on their leadership is about to happen, they will launch their nuclear weapons first. It's a terrifying use-it-or-lose-it posture. This preemptive strategy creates a hair-trigger situation with almost no room for error. And it leaves us with a pretty chilling thought, taken directly from our source material. A miscalculation or a misunderstanding could have catastrophic consequences. A stark reminder of the paradox that is North Korea.